So this morning I had a wonderful conversation with Jan from Fit Mind, Happy Heart Coaching, and we talked about her gratitude journal and why journaling is important and what it can do for you and why it really can genuinely be of benefit to you and change your life. And as well as coaching, we got into perception, empathy, sports people. We even had a digression and went down the road of talking about Hitler, but not in the way that you would think. But it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Good morning. Welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, and good morning to you, David. Yeah, it's a fabulous day outside. Beautiful, sunny day.
It is, isn't it?
Yay.
We had
Yeah,
some heavy rain here in Amesbury just briefly about an hour and a half ago, and now it's just blue skies and sunny.
yeah,
It's absolutely gorgeous.
I know. Always makes you feel great when you see blue skies, doesn't it?
It does. It definitely, most definitely, especially as we were predicted to have a week of just lashing down rain, which would be normal for this time of year. But
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
exactly.
we're funny.
Exactly.
We're a funny breed in Britain that we're used to rain but don't like it.
I know. And we keep talking about the weather. As though it's going to change anything at all.
Do you know it's one of the true stereotypes that really is. And it's like the British people really are obsessed with their weather, aren't they? Yes, yeah, we
Yeah,
are. It's
doesn't
not.
get a lot of it.
Yeah, it's not one of those like stereotypes. It's not really true. It's like no, we obsess about the weather.
Yeah, we do.
you
We
know,
do.
and
We
it's
do.
a constant conversation no matter where you are in the country. If you want to know, just have an in to talk to somebody. You can just say,
Yeah,
"What's the weather been like today? I've just got here." Or what's the weather
yeah,
going to be like tomorrow? And then we're best friends already.
absolutely. Even more so than football,
Yeah.
I'd
Oh,
say.
yeah. Definitely, absolutely. Because it spans across all generations. Nobody will ever
Yeah.
be offended that you ask them about the weather,
No,
and
no.
everybody will have an opinion on it. You know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for those international listeners, we are
Sorry.
really are obsessed with the weather.
Absolutely. Yeah, we apologise right now. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're sorry that you don't understand our obsession. Uh, One of
Oh,
the things I really wanted to get into very immediately was because
mm,
it's available on Amazon right now. Is your journal?
absolutely. Yes, yes. I am so pleased that it's on Amazon. I never thought I'd do something like that, but there we go. It's there, and I'm so proud that I managed to pull something like that off. Great.
So what exactly is it you have done? Because it's not just a journal, is it? There's more to it.
No, no. So I suppose journey over last X years has brought me to this point, like so many things do for so many people, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a backstory to it, but in terms of what this actually is, um, it's really a reflection and a gratitude journal. So I was trying to think because I mean everybody's gone through such a tough time the last year or so, and life is just, I think, more stressful for people generally. But particularly this last year, has been so difficult. And I was thinking, so what does I, as a coach, could do to help people that was simple for them to access? Pretty much everybody can access it. It's not expensive. It's very affordable. And I thought, what can I do to help? So um, I was thinking, well, it's about positive thinking to try to get out of that doom and gloom that is very easy to get into, particularly at the moment. I thought, how can I help people to start looking for the good things in life? Don't focus on the stuff that you really don't like and you really don't want. Focus on the stuff that you really do like. So I thought, well, a gratitude journal is good for that because that really does help you to think about the things that are fabulous in our lives, even if it's a small thing. And actually, what is a small thing? The fact that today the sun is out and it's a blue sky. That's a big thing, really.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean,
We take that for granted, don't we? But actually, it's a big thing, you know.
well, you and I spoke about that last week, didn't we? About our
We
parents
do.
and grandparents and just what they were grateful for because there was so little else.
Yeah,
And in this world we're in today, we're immersed with so much, but our gratitude levels have disappeared. The more that there is this very strange contradiction that none of us seem to be able to kind of put our finger on the cause. But it appears to be the more that we seem to have, the less grateful we are. And
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think so many people feel the need to keep up with the Joneses a lot of the time. You know, that they'll you'll often hear people talking about their lives, how busy they've become, how hard it is, how hard they work, and there's no denying those things. But some of that is self-inflicted, because if you want the 5 bedroom house with the 3 cars and the $100 a year, etc., etc., then that costs. You know, somebody's going to want more than their pound of flesh for that, and so it's rethinking things sometimes to say, well, actually, is that making me happy now that I've got all those things? Has that made any better for me? Am I any happier? Is my family any happier? You know, I'm racing around taking my kids to all of these clubs, and I'm working so hard, and I've got no time for me. Actually, am I any happier because of that? So I think focusing on the smaller things, as you said, you know, like our parents and grandparents, you know, they were happy to have food. You know, they were
yeah,
happy to have that. My dad, as he used to say to me, he was came from a family that was poor as church mice. You know, they really were poor. There was mud in their kitchen. You know, it was packed solid soil.
yeah,
That's what it. Um, and as he would say, they would go to bed early to go to sleep to forget they were hungry. That's how bad it was.
yeah,
His mum would go out into the hedgerows, and they would as kids picking nettles so she could make nettle soup. You know, it's stuff like that, and it's when you think, you know, and yet he would say, "I didn't know I was poor. Everybody else was in the same." He said exactly that. Like everybody else was in the same position as me. You know, he and his brother, because my dad was one of 9, had to shared shoes and boots because they didn't have enough for all the children. So one would have to wear the wellies, the other one would have to wear the shoes, and then they'd swap. So, you know, and when they got bigger, they'd cut the toes out.
well, because I remember that as soon as you said that, I reminded me of a story of my nan, bless her, who's no longer with us, and I think she was, by the time they'd got to adults, there were 13 had survived as children. So there was a few that were lost sort of from under the age of 5, which was, you know, Southern Ireland,
Yeah,
well, and
tragic.
anywhere in the world back then. You know, you're talking like the 1910s, 20s, child mortality was high. But they used to have to walk to the water pump every day to get fresh water, and that was about a mile from the small holding where they lived. And they were
Yeah,
lucky because they had a small holding,
yeah,
but there was no running water, so off they went as kids with the with their buckets, filled them up with
yeah,
water. And she was so proud of the fact that they never had no shoes. Not proud, but it's just like,
yeah,
this is how easy you've got it. You have
yeah.
shoes. And she used to tell me this story, and I've heard this story 100 times, if not 1,000. And it's typical of, now she's not here. I wish I could hear it in her tone again, but
Yeah.
it was, in the summer they weren't allowed to wear school shoes. They only wore them in the winter. And the other thing they used to do, because there was so many of them, because there was 13, and there wasn't enough shoes to go around. On a Sunday, there were two masses at different times, and one would go in the morning and one would go in the afternoon, so they could turn up with shoes on, because there wasn't enough to spread about. So they were just grateful, and there was never any a conversation about having socks. No, you had
Yeah.
shoes. You were shoes or bare feet, you know.
Yeah.
And if you were wearing the shoes, a brother or sister wasn't wearing them.
Yeah. Exactly that. Exactly that. You know, my dad would give us stories of having to walk 10 miles to the doctor to go and get some medicine to bring back. And back then, the health service
No.
hadn't been formed either. So he would have to go and pay for that. And as he said, you know, we didn't have very much money, so we had to be really sick for mum to be able to afford to get us to have medicine of any kind. You know, they didn't do cough medicine as such. And then my mum would actually say that, you know, those old Vicks lozenges, they would be sweets, and they would be thinking, yay, great,
Yeah,
we've got sweets.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
like you said, we can't place ourselves in those shoes. No pun
No,
intended.
no.
But because you're going back to a time where there was no ambulance. If you were sick, you had to find the money to go to a doctor,
Yeah.
and you're already dirt poor. So
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you might have to walk 10 miles to see the doctor. So
Yeah.
you've got no money. You're so ill that even though you have no money, you're going to go to the doctor and pay for some advice. But
Yeah.
you have 10 miles to walk there first. But you're that sick,
And
you
you're
should actually,
Capricorn.
yeah. So, and really, so you've basically got to walk a marathon to get treatment you can't afford because you're that sick, but you should be in bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were grateful.
Exactly that. I think, and it's that perspective that makes you kind of think actually we are fortunate, because some of those things that we take for granted, it's not that long ago people couldn't take for granted. It
No.
just didn't happen. They didn't have the education that we have today. They didn't have social support that's out there today. There's certainly no complaint from that for me. I think it's amazing, that we do have all those things. However, I think if you've not got that perspective to see that, you don't necessarily realize that actually how grateful
Yeah.
we should be for all of these things, and it's a collective thing. It's not, we all are supporting other people, however much or little. Everybody does that through taxation, you
Yeah,
know um,
absolutely. It's, it's, you know, I think we're all in a danger, myself included.
yeah.
Of being cynical, and I'll put it out there right now. For I think the last 20 years, I've had a minimum of 2 jobs. So for at
Mm,
least 20 years, I've paid basic rate tax on a second job, right?
mm,
So look, I pay my taxes,
yeah.
but so excuse me, I can be just as cynical as anyone else about wastage and
Yeah.
and how we spend it. I can be as cynical as anyone else, but do I believe that everybody should? 100%.
Yeah.
you know and when you go down the rabbit holes of what's mismanaged and what isn't, you're just getting into, well, that's my opinion, my perspective. you know but we are so fortunate in this country. So moving it back to your journal,
Yeah.
which for those that didn't hear the first time is available on Amazon, and
Yeah.
and I will on the YouTube link, the YouTube one, I'll post a link so that people
Okay.
can buy it. What is it? Because you mentioned about your journey to get there. What was that journey?
um Well, through my entire life has gone through lots and lots of different chapters, like everybody does, I guess. It's been reasonably eventful at times, and last probably 10, 15 years, particularly eventful. Lots of those life events that they say will happen, the top 10 things that give you stress. I've probably done 9 out of those, so that that is what that's done with me, is made me look at myself and say, okay, what was your part in that? Can't keep blaming everybody else, and you
Yeah,
can't say that. What was that about me? So of course that is it's reflecting on yourself, and it's learning about yourself. So that's the other thing with the journal. So it's gratitude, but it's also reflection. So there's 2 parts to it, really. There's the looking for the real positives in life, because that's a great place to start. Don't focus on the other stuff. Focus on the really good stuff, because actually there's loads of it around you. You know, and then there's the reflecting, which is also about looking at an event or your day and saying, you might say, that didn't go quite as I would like it to. Okay, so let me think about that. What could I have done differently? So one of the things that I do in the beginning of the book is to actually go through some tools as to how you might start to review things. It's just a 5-step process, essentially, take you through how you might do that, because I think a lot of people don't really know how to reflect on that. They just live in the moment.
yeah,
It's face value and carry on. But actually, there's usually a story to something, and how we are in the world gets reflected back to us. You know, was it the third? Is it Newton's law or something? I was only listening to something this morning, which is about Newton's law of physics, which essentially says, what you put out will come back to you.
yeah,
So something like that. So it is thinking those things through. If I'm behaving in this way, or if this is what's coming back to me, what am I doing that might be provoking that? Um, And that I think is some stuff that I've done for myself over the last 10, 15 years particularly, is to look at, okay, where did I actually provoke some of that stuff? You know, I could easily blame, well, you did so and that wasn't very nice, but actually what did I do here?
I found that one of the probably most useful, and in terms of personal development, one of the most prolific tools I've ever had is forget what happened.
Yeah,
What was my place in it all? What
yeah,
what was I doing that had an impact on that? And when I've done that, there's a couple of things that have happened. One is it can be incredibly painful to reflect on your responsibility in something that happened. Like,
mm,
oh shit,
yeah,
I did that. I permitted that. My
yeah,
I may defend myself now and say, nah, no, I was treated wrongly. This was this or this. It's like, no, there were red flags.
yeah,
You were so desperate or so willing, like such a willing participant. And then
yeah,
when it all imploded, you just buried yourself in, I'm a victim. This is unfair, and I'm not excusing people's behaviour. I'm
no,
trying to recognise, ah, what did I do first? How did it happen? And
yeah,
when I've done that, I realise that actually I wasn't just wandering aimlessly. Well, I was kind of wandering aimlessly down the path, but actually there were lots of signs. But I was just like, no, no. And then the blinkers went
yeah,
up, and I was just head first. And I can look at lots of things throughout my entire life that when I've done that, it's just like, oh yeah, right. So yeah, I did that to me, or I allowed that to happen. There was ways to navigate it that it shouldn't
yeah,
or wouldn't have happened. And some of that was also just understanding my own vulnerability and why I was seeking perhaps validation from people, or where those
yeah.
insecurities were that prevented me from trusting something or someone.
Yeah.
And
There's a kind of duality for human beings because I kind of, you probably heard of Richard Dawkins, you know, he's a very
mm,
famous atheist and loves to write books about it. And I'm not saying that I believe in everything he writes or even that I agree with him, but there is one of the books that he wrote was called The Selfish Gene. And it is something that I've observed, probably in myself and others, which is around sometimes we can be incredibly selfish. And some of that relates to our survival. So there is
yeah,
a mechanism. You have to be selfish at a certain level to actually survive as an organism, because ultimately human beings are organisms, you know, biological creatures that are programmed to survive. And society has softened all of that. That says if you want to live in society, then you need to behave in certain ways to live and be accepted and live a reasonably harmonious life with others. Then you need to kind of soften some of that, and these are the rules. This is how you do that. So you know, some of this is our base instinct, but we have to be acceptable to ourselves and others. We have to look at that and say, okay, that wasn't the best behaviors that I could do, that I could have displayed here. Where did I where did I go wrong, and what could I do differently next time? So that's one of the tools, you know, that I'm trying to support people with, you know, help people to live a better life ultimately, because they've begun to understand themselves and what triggers them,
yeah.
what's getting to you,
Could is
changes.
it is interesting because we're just, we call ourselves humans, but we're animals, and
Yeah,
broadly speaking, and I'm probably taking some artistic license here, but when you look at the animal world, the more complex the emotional build up of the animal is, the more chaotic their world is. You know,
yes,
the animals that aren't known for self reflection, self identity, that don't demonstrate emotions or feelings outside primary instinct, have very
yeah,
ordered lives.
yes,
But it's only when you kind of move towards mammals,
yeah,
some birds that show high levels of intelligence and connections to others, that their lives become more chaotic. And sometimes that chaos is the seeking of approval, or the loss of something which causes grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're
I
badly adapted to it.
yeah. One of the other things that experiences in life, I sort of moved in a work environment. I've moved from operational strategic management into senior HR, into coaching, and I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people and supporting a lot of people. A lot of my focus, if I think about it, reflect on it, has been focused towards people and wanting to help them to get the best for them and in the work environment for the organization that they work for. And I've often observed people and needed to guide them and coach them in what was your part in that, because especially in HR, you're a bit like the dentist. People don't go to you because their teeth are fine. They're there because it's not right, or the police or doctors. You're there because something isn't right. So they've come to you, or the employer has said something's not right, can you sort this out? And sometimes the employer says, actually, can you just get them out, because not. And think, can't quite do that, and actually we need to give this person an opportunity to rectify things. So then I've had to get to talk with people to help them to recognize what it is that actually they've done which is not helpful to them, and certainly not to their colleagues. I do remember one lady in particular who really did not grasp how her behaviour was impacting people. She didn't even come in and say hello to anybody in the morning. And I had to explain to her how saying hello to people in the morning actually introduced her into her work, with her colleagues, and made them all feel nice and calm. And you think, gosh, I've had to explain that to somebody, but she really didn't understand that. And that's, I guess, to do with her socialisation.
You see, I'm the sort of person that could happily work with someone like that. Just like they come in and don't say anything, I'm like, yeah, it's fine with me. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. Water was off a duck's back. I have a friend of mine who I did a podcast with, Tracy, and she is a tech founder from San Francisco. And one of the bases, I was talking to her about how they built their company and the foundations of what the values that were important to them, because this is possibly something that you talk about in coaching as well, is if you can understand your values and why they matter, you then put boundaries in place so they're not crossed, and that way you tend to lead a more fulfilling life, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she was talking about was emotional intelligence, emotional IQ, and they used to have this traffic light system. It's just like green, amber, and red. So when somebody's like, "Oh, how are you today?" I'm red, I'm amber, or I'm green.
Okay.
And I was just like, that's so effing San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Because I said, you know what I mean? Where I am, so how are you feeling? Piss off and don't talk to me. I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. In some circumstances, people really don't care. In this particular one, it was a big group of women.
Yeah.
A bit more complex at times when they're all working together, especially in a small physical environment, which these particular people were, and they were in a process. They were having to work through a process.
It's incredible.
So they found that really, really hard, amongst many other things. There was lots of other things that weren't a lot right, really, but that in particular really wound them up, that she just, didn't say hello, didn't say goodbye, was very solitary human being. And on one level, that's fine. It's fine to be solitary.
It is, and it's difficult. It is difficult because when someone is naturally solitary, they don't have an awareness of the group requirements, and it's not always they don't care. They just it's not how they think. It's not the way their brain is wired to perceive the world. Like you were saying with the Richard Dawkins things, what you put out, you'll receive. Well, if you're solitary, you put out a solitary vibe, so your feedback is very narrow compared to some.
Yeah, exactly. And perhaps that's for them, it's like, great, I don't get too much impact. And we have to accept that, not everybody is the same. But definitely that was, when I was working in that kind of field, there's a lot of pressure to help people to conform to a degree, because actually the employer just wants it all sorted. We need you here to do your job. Don't really need all this faffing around and people getting upset. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
Get on with it. I'm paying you to do your job, get on with it. And that is very often an attitude, that,
I'm gonna chip in here because
okay,
my previous bosses will tell you that I'm a nightmare for this, because
okay,
you will come to me and you'll be like, "Oh, you did a really good job." No, I did my job. You didn't employ me to be incompetent. You employed me to be competent and do my job, and
yeah,
that's what I've done.
yeah,
And I kind of understand. I'm getting better at understanding it, but I can, which is it's a contradiction in terms, because as a coach, I'm very emphatic with people. I'm very reflective. I can very much see other sides of the story. I'm genuinely good at it. But when I'm at work doing my job, it can be very black and white. No, this is my job, and I don't always receive praise well. Do
yeah,
you know what I mean?
okay, yeah,
Because it's just like, well, and I've literally said, where does it say in my contract I'm supposed to be incompetent? And it's like,
yes, indeed,
right. So what have I done that's outside of my job? You employed
yeah,
me to do my job. Even when
yeah,
I've done really, and I've done well and I'm doing well. But is that not what you expected in my job when you did the interview?
yeah,
Is that not what you hoped for?
yeah,
And it's,
exactly, yeah. The basic employment contract, exactly that, isn't it?
yeah,
I pay you, you do job.
yeah,
That's at the heart of it. I guess having also, been trained in HR, you learn because the laws, and then it comes down to court cases. And then what does that
yes,
actually mean? I.e., if you do this as an employer, you're going to find yourself in a court. It doesn't matter that X person was a nightmare. You didn't follow the right procedure, which means you need to do X, Y, Z, and all of those things. So I suppose my rough edges previously from sort of operational strategic management were then very definitely shaved off by the next phase, which was, senior HR, because I learned I couldn't be like that. Not if I didn't want the company to keep ending up in courts,
well,
you know.
this is yeah, it's been an eternal nightmare for all my bosses when I'm running teams, because
Yeah,
all of my staff will have said to you at the first instant, is that I can be very intimidating because I'm so black and white about everything. And I have two case managers that have referred to it as fluffy bunnies. You've got to be fluffy bunnies, David. And that kind of comes down a little bit later. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Once we've got to know each other, and I can be more relaxed about, you do know what you're doing and you're going to follow the instructions. Or whenever you're doing a job, once you've settled into it, but you don't need my input, you don't need my instructions. But
mm,
while we're going for that learning curve, it's very black and white. I don't want you to do this. I want you to do it at this level, at this point. Which can be the complete opposite of how I coach, which is the
yeah.
contradiction.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting
Yeah,
contrast that.
yeah, it is. And maybe it's just because I work in roles that can be kind of very black and white. So to give some context, I work in head injury rehabilitation, and I have to deal with families and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
some things have to be very black and white, but then I might have to have a conversation with a person, like somebody's wife. It's like, your husband's never going to come back the way you think they are, or somebody's son, or somebody's husband,
yeah,
or dad. Yeah. So there's times that it has to be very black and white because they need a routine and a structure, and you have to follow that. And then there's times when I have to be very empathic, sorry, and be sympathetic and try and navigate a conversation where,
mm,
look, this is a head injury. It's not going to change. That person that you was your husband, your brother, your dad, your son, whatever,
mm,
then they're different now,
yeah,
and no amount of rehabilitation is going to bring that personality back.
yeah.
You know,
And that's hard news to receive, isn't it? As well as to give. That must be hard to give.
it is, but it's the advice. It continues for the whole. It's never going to stop because they are always deep down pining for the person that was there before.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Tough stuff. It is tough stuff, that, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it is. But I want to just move back a little bit again to
Yeah.
the gratitude side of your journal,
Yeah.
and how that's helps, but either helps you or has helped your clients with self reflection.
It's definitely helped me. As I said, life as like it is for most people. it's a series of it's like being on a roller coaster, isn't it? Sometimes you're on a high, and then you're on a low, and then you're on a high, and then you're on a low. And I mean, I've journaled on and off pretty much since I was probably about 8. When
Wow.
your mum and bought you those lovely little diaries of with that had the thing on with, and I love the ones with the padlock on. I had to have those. Those are fabulous. Love those. And I've done it on and off for many, many years. Didn't know about gratitude when I was 8. Didn't know it when I was about 28. Not really, but it's one of those things that I've come to. And how it helps me is to be able to focus on things like that, to really realize that, having a nice cup of coffee. My partner bought me a beautiful cup of coffee this morning that
Yeah.
as he does, bless his heart, he does it. Oh, you've got 11 o'clock. I'll make you a nice cup of coffee, he says to me, which is lovely. Something like that somebody cares enough to know that you're doing something at that time and wants you to have something nice. That's appreciation and gratitude that actually I have that in my life, that somebody does do that for me. Realization that, the sky is blue, the sun is shining out there today. And despite the fact that we're in the middle of pandemic, which isn't fun for
No.
most of it. It's really not fun. I miss my family desperately, as I'm sure pretty much everybody does. But somehow have to find a way through that. And actually, that's a good example. Actually, we are going through tough times, but there's still good stuff out there. So I definitely deliberately try to find things like that, and it could be like I've just seen a bird flying across.
Yeah.
I train myself to notice there's a lovely bird out there. It's lovely. There's a little robin that comes and talks to us in the garden. The pigeons, which annoys us, but they still do it every day, sit on the fence, mess all over it. But actually, they're funny. I looked at them this morning and they look like Laurel and Hardy just talking to each other. It's things like that give you little pieces of joy and smiles. And that's, for me, where it kind of helps, I think. And so with clients, because they'll come to you with, like I say, people generally don't seek you out because it's all working well.
Yeah.
They're fine, so they don't generally seek you out. Occasionally you get people who want to develop and, develop more good stuff. But more often than not, it's people where things aren't going well. So by helping people to see that actually it's not all doom and gloom, that there are lots of good things in their life. And it doesn't have to be things like nature around you, although that's a great place to start. It's also about the good relationships you have. And even in the relationships which might be a little bit fractious, actually, what are the good parts in that? Because it's rarely all bad. People, I find it hard to think there's people who are all bad.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I have those philosophical arguments with myself and an occasional friend about, well, was Adolf Hitler a really bad person? Or was he sick? Or what? Was there any good bits to him?
There's an interesting quote about Adolf Hitler. Oh, there's a few, but one of them is, people think he was evil, but 9 million people voted for him.
Yeah.
He resonated with a population.
Yeah.
Now, that is at one point, and then obviously he went further down the spectrum. And with that, because of basically the mechanics of war, we went into genocide and stuff like that. But Hitler, at the beginning, if anybody's ever studied his history, he was a socialist. He believed in people. He believed in, but what turned him and what impact did the war have on him to kind of do what he did and what he gave permission to? But there's very little evidence that he ever believed in that sort of thing to begin with. It was how his mind changed as his power evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I it's one of the basic tenets of coaching, isn't it? Which is, you have positive belief in people, that their intent is always positive. The behaviors might be weird, the outcomes might be weird and not great, but actually, generally, in their heads, they have some positive intent.
It's a very difficult perception to understand. But Adolf Hitler thought he was doing the right thing by Germany.
Yeah, I know.
And it's a very difficult point to swallow. But he didn't think he was destroying a country. He thought he was making it great.
Yeah.
And he felt the rest of the world, which basically ganged up on him, was literally was the enemy,
Yeah.
and the way they fought was the enemy. The same as Mussolini, who sided
Yeah.
with, there's all of these different factors and factions, which were never there kind of pre 1939. It all
Yeah.
developed as a necessity due to the mechanics of war.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, as you say, it's quite a difficult concept, I think, in lots of fields, particularly when you've got people like that to look at, and then you
Yeah,
think, because on the one hand you're being torn because you've been told these are evil people, and that's what history has judged them to be. It's when you're trained to do the things that we do, is that you then question some of that and you look at it and say, can that be true? I mean, for a very long time I have questioned what is evil.
yeah,
I, is there such a thing, or is actually somebody really really sick? That's the way their mind has worked. That's not a conversation you have with too many people, because a lot of people will get quite upset about it.
yeah.
So it's one I generally can well back from, other than with a few trusted people who are going to listen and take part in a objective debate about it.
Because there's a significant difference in that. There's an objective debate as opposed to I approve of their behaviour.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
an objective debate is understanding how, but for a few degrees of separation, we're not as far away from what happened as we might think, or we'd like
Yeah.
to protect ourselves. And going slightly sideways, I was watching a YouTube program recently with Eddie Hall, who was the 2017 World's Strongest Man, and a guy called Ross Edgley. And Ross Edgley, sorry, was the guy who a couple of years ago swam around the coast of Great Britain.
Wow.
Yeah, a phenomenal athlete. And I also like him because he's 5'8", the same as me. But he does these superhuman feats, which I don't do. But we have one thing in common, and him and Eddie Hall, because like they both come across as the nicest people, And Eddie Hall can be, he's like 19 stone and it was the world's strongest man, you know. But Eddie Hall made a really good point that you can't be who they are and do what they do without being a little narcissistic.
Yeah.
And and by that it's all out, and you either supporting me or you're against me.
Mm.
And
Mm.
you only have to put that into politics. You only have to put that into world leaders.
Yeah.
And they don't rise and they can't lead if they don't have that little bit of narcissism that says you're either with me or against me.
Yeah.
It's just you can't predict what path that goes down.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I think, you know, I can remember a time when a bit of an awakening for me, and I would have been, I'm guessing, very early 20s, because it would have been when the miners' strike was on. You had
Yeah,
Margaret Thatcher, and you had Arthur Scargill, who was portrayed as this horrendous human being, is all out chaps. And having been a teenager and younger in the 70s, I remember the days when 3-day weeks, you didn't have, all of a sudden you had no heating, you had no cooking because there wasn't enough energy going on, and all of that stuff. And so we were all thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to happen again in the 80s. And Arthur Scargill was therefore a demon, and he was portrayed as such, really, just this
yeah.
appalling human being who was damaging the country, etc., etc. I can then remember somebody interviewing him, but about him and his, just as a normal human being, in his personal life.
Yeah.
Such a nice man. And I just thought, wow, you've got this just totally opposite people. That was a really moment of awakening for me. It stuck in my head how people can be different, and then not just these awful human beings that are being portrayed. There's something else going on.
Well, this is the thing, because and if you look at top sports people,
Mm.
when they're in the middle of their careers or the height of their careers, or before long before they retired, and you talk to anyone that knew them, it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
you know and they've spent their entire childhood and early adult life losing. Even if they won at national levels, they were always reminded in one way or another that they had to be better to achieve their ultimate goals, and nothing else mattered. And the one thing that's drummed into all of the most successful athletes, whether it's drummed into them or they understand it at the beginning, you are nothing unless you win.
Yeah.
And I remember Michael Johnson. For those that don't know, he was one of the most successful 400 and 200 meter runners in the 90s, and set the 400 meter world record, which I think still stands. But I do think Usain Bolt broke his 200 meter record. But Michael Johnson and his coach had one philosophy: if we're not going to win, there's no point turning up.
No.
And he based his whole career on, if I don't win, there's no point me being here. You know, and Daley Thompson,
Yeah.
the world's greatest ever decathlete, famously trained on Christmas Day because he said nobody else was. And
Yeah.
how are you going to beat me when I'm doing stuff that you're not? But at what expense? Do you know what I mean? But it's for all of those people, it's all or nothing. But you take them out of that process, out of that. And again, famously, sports people who self-destruct when they retire because they no longer have an all or nothing obsession, and they're now lost. It's like, well, now what do I do? Because I don't know how to do anything other than be obsessed.
Yeah.
You know. And I remember seeing an interview with Bradley Wiggins' wife. I think her name's Karen. If I'm wrong, I apologise. And she said that Bradley Wiggins, the cyclist, is not the Bradley Wiggins that I know at home. The two are just different people.
Interesting.
She says, and I don't know that person that you all know.
Yeah.
You know, I paraphrase slightly, but that's kind of the gist of what she was saying. Is because at home he's not that person because he's not on his bike, he's not cycling. But she also knew when he was focused on what he was doing, you didn't then try and take home into his environment.
Yeah. You know, and if I think about how that translates into the non-super athletes and the non-famous people.
Oh, you mean like you and I, the non-super
like
athletes?
You and I, yes, absolutely. Those, you know, I truly believe that nobody wakes up in a day and says, do you know what, I'm going to really mess my job up.
No.
Nobody wakes up and thinks, I'm going to really do horrible things to my kids to mess their heads up, to mess with their heads. Nobody does that. You know, everybody has positive intent. It's just sometimes their behaviors get in the way because they're not yet self-aware. They don't notice things. They're not reflective. So that's, you know, taking it back to the journal and what I'm trying to help people with, that's part of that process, is to help them reflect on their days, but also and their behaviors, but also to become much more self-aware. Because when you do that, you can change things for the better for you, and then you begin to notice other people and what's going on with them, and how you can enhance those relationships for the, you know, for the betterment of you all. And it's got to start with you.
How would you suggest somebody gets into journaling?
Well, obviously buy the book.
My bad. Let me start that again. Once somebody's bought your book, right? See, you can tell I'm still at the amateur stage of my podcasting career. So we're just going to count this in. Right, ready? Right. So when somebody buys your journaling, how do you suggest they start a structure to continue and make it successful?
Well, to start with, it's about reading the first sort of chapter, which is me giving tools, explaining what journaling's about, giving tools to help, about how you can start to practice gratitude, to start noticing. A lot of it is about noticing. It's not that blinkers on, I'm not thinking about anything else going on, I'm just doing that. It's to start noticing. It's sitting back, being quiet with yourself, and just starting to listen and look what's going on with other people, what's going on in the world, because that's when you start to notice it's not all doom and gloom, it's not all negative out there. Actually, there is positives out there. So I would ask people to do that to start with, just to get into the journaling, is to get into the gratitude thing, is to sit back and start to notice, you know, because we all get so busy in life, don't we? We're just busy doing things. And people will often say, when you ask somebody something, they say, oh no, can't do that, I'm too busy. Well, actually, it's your choice to do what you're doing. You can actually change that. You don't have to be, you can give yourself time to do that. It's noticing that you're busy because you've made yourself busy. You can choose different activities. So gratitude comes from noticing, becoming aware and noticing what's around you. And by keep practicing it, you become better and better at that awareness and noticing. And then you can start to understand, well, what is actually going on here, because you're seeing all of these little dots all around the place, and you're beginning to join them all up and say, right, so that's why that happened, or that's why that's a really good thing. And actually I've noticed the robin 5 days on the trot, or I've noticed the pigeons doing their little thing. With the pigeons, one of the things we do with the pigeons, just as a slight digression from that, is we do this little soap opera with the pigeons and watch them all around, but doing things, and we call them names, and then we watch them, because it's always about mating with them. They don't stop.
They don't, do they?
Yeah, no.
We say breed like rabbits. It should be breed like pigeons.
I know, but they're also out there, and and you see her. Oh no, not now. Just go away. But we have this little we do this little soap opera, and put words in their mouths, as it were, which is just so fun. But that comes from noticing. It's just watching stuff going on.
And one of the things I'd like to add to that for people that kind of there's a huge benefit for gratitude that I don't think people understand is, and it was something that you were talking about earlier, was we tend to seek help when the worlds go wrong.
Yeah.
And just to go over something, you're right. Nobody gets up in the morning thinking, I'm going to destroy my day.
No.
It's not what's on your mind, right?
No.
But life happens. And then, like you say, then people seek help and they start to say, I should be more grateful. But the thing about learning to be grateful, which I think trumps everything, is that when you're then having in a good place and you're still being grateful, the smallest things can just blow your day. They're just like, oh, wow, I'm having such an amazing day. And then when you get the surprise, the birthday card, the letter, you bump into somebody, or you're going out with friends, everything is amplified because you're just enjoying it in a present moment. And I don't like to get too much into kind of being present and all of the I think it's like the hippie stuff side of things, but there is a genuine, tangible thing that you can hold on to, that look, if you practice this in the bad times and then continue to do it in the good times, those good times are really mind-blowingly good, and you start to understand how great some of your friends are, and you start to understand how good some of your relationships are. And like you were saying, the dots, and you draw the picture, not only do you start drawing a different picture, but the picture becomes three-dimensional and multi-layered. And you start seeing how, once when I would have reacted like this, I now don't.
Yeah.
And, and you start kind of doing that. There's just something about you start to appreciate how whole you can become and how much you actually have in your life.
Yes. I liken it, I don't know whether you remember Star Trek and Mr. Spock, and he used to play 3D chess.
Yes.
And it's like playing 3D chess. You start to see actually there's all different kind of moves. It's not just that thing that's just here in front of me. It's as you say, it's multi-layered and multi-dimensional. There's all these different things, and you see your part in it. But it is also all those fantastic things in life. And as you say, it just amplifies, because if you train yourself to look for the good things, that's what you'll see.
Yeah, it is.
When the less than good stuff happens, which it inevitably does, because nothing ever goes to plan 100%.
No.
So, and just life happens. There's things you cannot control at all. There's just things you will never be able to control. So it's, how do you manage yourself in the world? And if you're able to see the positives to it, if you're even in some of the really dire stuff, and sometimes there is really dire stuff, but if you find that, then you will come out of that. And then when you've got the really lovely stuff going on, it's just even better, isn't it? Because you've noticed all these other things, like, the world's fabulous out there today, and I'm sitting with my best friend, we're drinking a nice glass of fizz or whatever it is, we're having a fabulous time talking to each other.
I do think that's one of the kind of the positives that's come out of this year, is when people have been able to reconnect, they realize how much they've missed people. And it's just something that we used to take for granted, like literally, take for granted. And then you kind of reconnect with people, friends and family and stuff. And you just, it's amazing how much you realize you miss people. Even if you was talking on
Yeah.
the phone and Zoom, just having them present in the room with you. It's just
Yeah.
like, or being able to just meet up and go for a coffee or something. And
Yeah.
it's cliched, I know, but it's those simple things that lost their value. The currency of that, of something so simple as having coffee with friends, going
Yeah.
around to see somebody, walking through the shops, whatever. Just it lost all its value. And currently, we're in this really good place where these things are high currency again. And I have I'm going to see some friends hopefully for Christmas Eve, but like I did last year, and we've already spoken about how excited we are and how
Mm.
we're looking forward to it because it's just some normality,
Yeah.
and and it's suddenly become really high currency,
Yeah.
and I think that is one of the few positives that's come out of this year is that value we have just staying connected with each other.
Yeah. As have hugs.
Yeah,
How everybody is missing hugs. How much do we take that for granted?
and
That.
I'm a hugger as well. I like to hug.
Yeah, me too. And I so miss. I've got my boys who are, both of them are taller than me. I love having adult sons. And they give you that big bear hug when you
Yeah,
see fabulous, just
yeah.
fabulous. The best things in life. That.
It is. It is. My mum says the same. Do you know what I mean? Hugs from her sons are just good. Big, like you say, that big bear hug. She loves it.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely adores it. And is just moving it into. Is your website up now? Up and running now?
I'm still working on it.
Is
I've
still.
I've had to train myself
Yeah, I know.
in building a website. And I was having some technical problems. Anyway, I won't bore you with all that, but you'll know what it's like. When you have
Yeah,
to build it,
yeah, yeah.
it never goes straight as you think it is. So I'm hoping that it'll be done this week or by the end of next week.
See,
You know.
I've been so lucky because I don't know what it's like because
Okay.
I have a guy that I coach who's been on the podcast, a chap called Gid Cedric, who's a musician and music producer, and also does a little bit of web development on the side. So in exchange for coaching and some stuff, he built me a website
Yay.
because I realised I was going to do it, and I just realised I just it's just there's some skills you have to decide: is it worth your time and effort to try and learn,
Yeah.
or can somebody do a much better job than your skill set takes? But for when it is up and running, where will people be able to find you?
It will be at www.fitmindhappyheartcoaching.com.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
the journal available on Amazon is called?
It is called Gratitude Journal from Fit Mind Happy Heart, which is the name of my coaching company. And the reason it's called that is because I believe to have a happy heart, you need a fit mind. And that's where the coaching comes in to help you to understand yourself, to get your mind fit so that you can have a happy life essentially and feel happy in here.
I like that. I like that. And so as well as the journaling,
Yeah.
what recommendations would you give? Like the magic wand scenario. What would you suggest people do to start improving their life to get fit mind, healthy heart?
I would say start your process of self-awareness. Definitely self-awareness and noticing. Some of that would be about active listening for a start. So again, when I've worked with many clients, and I've worked in the corporate sector as well as private clients as well on personal level, some of the things that I would start to get people to do is start to become self-aware, because it is about you to start with. It's how you show up in the world, how you are in the world. Underlying my business, I've got a model which is thinking, being and doing, how you are in the world, how you think about things, how you be in the world, and what you actually do in the world. So to start with, it's changing the thinking, becoming self-aware, and becoming aware of other people, noticing them, because by doing that you can start to understand, what do I need to do better to get a happier life? How do I become happier and a happier heart? And it all starts with you. So self-awareness, noticing, active listening, I'd say.
Self-awareness, noticing, and active listening.
Active listening, yeah, which is all the same thing really. It's all about noticing
It is.
yourself and
It is.
ultimately. Yeah.
And that's a great place to finish. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been fun. Thank you very much.
You're
Had a
welcome.
great chat